So I took the kids to that birthday party last weekend.
Right.
And they were fighting over everything, like what type of temporary tattoo they got, even though it was super girly, and our son is usually all boys and trucks and dinosaurs, this or that, and I'm just embarrassed by how much the kids were fighting, and they're probably looking at me like, well, she doesn't discipline her kids. And at what point is it the parents' fault? It's the parents' fault. Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb.
So, there's some obvious cases out there where it is the parents' fault. Take, for instance, they just sentenced Jennifer Crumbley to years in prison for her son Ethan doing that school shooting up in Michigan.
Right. That's a very interesting case because, along with the national news of it being obviously a mass shooting, one of the things that was important to look at was one of the first times where the parents of the criminal defendant, in this case, the mass shooter, would be criminally charged in conjunction with the crime. And that's what really kind of made this case interesting, was whether or not the parents could actually be not necessarily co-conspirators, but be charged with the crime. And in this case, it turns out the answer is yes.
Well, is it one of those slippery slopes like, well, they didn't commit the crime, and I did the best I could raising my kid, but they went off and made their own decisions because, we tell our kids all the time, say please, say thank you, stop fighting, stop hitting your sister, and yet they have the free will to do things against your wishes. Is it one of those cases?
Yeah, so in the Army, there's a phrase is that you can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibility. So the person in charge is ultimately responsible for the success or failure of the union. So in this particular instance, we have a number of factors that played into the parents being charged, and I really think that it's the correct move. I know a lot of times people say this is a slippery slope of where culpability lies, but when you look at the fact that the mother purchased the firearm for someone underneath that was under the age of 21, and in reality, that would be considered a straw purchase, which is illegal to do that. When you are filling out the background check on your firearms purchase, it says, are you purchasing this firearm for yourself or for somebody else? It's a really trick question because if you check the box, I'm buying it for somebody else, that's a crime. And so you'll get denied on your background check. So in this particular instance, we know that she purchased the firearm for her son because there was either the Instagram post or something like that, social media post that said, here I am, I'm at the gun range with mommy and son day, and it's his new present. So
his new gun,
his new gun, his new present. So obviously she purchased it for him, which makes it automatically a straw purchase. But also he's under the age of 21. He's not supposed to have a handgun anyway. Long guns are usually 18. But in this particular instance, we see that she, had the first instance of committing, potentially a crime right there. So then add into the lack of the firearm being stored properly, right? So so in some states, it's illegal to allow a person under the age of 21 or minor to have access to a firearm. And she did say, hey, look, firearms aren't my thing, even though
she took him to the range and bought the gun. So she seems pretty comfortable to me.
Exactly. That's literally what I was about to say, Kimberly. So, but yeah, so she said, firearms aren't my thing. And the father was the one that was supposed to lock up the firearm. And obviously we see that's again another violation. Then we get into warning signs. There's text messages between her and her son where he sees demons and he sees ghosts and things like that. Now, she tried to play this off as it was just an inside joke between the two of them. But, I don't think anybody was laughing at any mental health issues that were going on there. And then let's get into the school itself. When he's doing the drawings that say, I can't get the voices out of my head. And I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have his exact drawing, but it was a violent drawing, and the voices are telling him to kill people and stuff. And she gets called into the principal's office. And they're like, look, your son needs mental help. And she said, look, I'm not taking him out. And then the principal has a rumor that the principal
knew there was a gun and
there was a firearm.
Didn't even bother to tell the mother, like, hey, we heard that there might be a gun in your son's bag while you're here. Can we ask you to look into your son's bag with, in our presence? If it were a locker, it would be school property, so they would have the right to just go and do it.
That's a no-brainer.
So yeah, if the parents are at fault, what about the principal?
Yeah, there's plenty of culpability.
Because it was just a few hours later the shooting happened.
Yeah, there's plenty of culpability. Now, as far as, in my opinion, I am not an attorney. I do have a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice, so I am able to speak to criminal law. But again, everything that I say, I'm not an attorney, and nor do I purport myself to be one. But in my opinion, I would say that the principal wouldn't necessarily be criminally charged because, I don't know if the statute of being, making the decision not to do a search of the bag or falls under criminal liability. But certainly it's eligible for tort, which is a lawsuit, a civil suit. And I haven't read up on what's happening to the school district, but I can only imagine that the parents of the students that were injured and were killed
could
certainly going to
go
file
after the principal.
Yeah, certainly going to file a lawsuit against the school district and the school and the principal and on down the line.
Yeah. So the mom stored the gun improperly. That's pretty obvious. Also, she received text messages from the son saying, I want to hurt people. I see demons, blah, blah, and she just ignored them. And so it's rumored that she was involved in an affair. So she was probably a little distracted from that one. So she just, I think this is a pretty obvious case of, you have some responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. If there hadn't been, so let's just, kind of walk the dog on this. If there hadn't been the illegal straw purchase of a firearm to give to her minor child, or not minor, but...
so at least on that, she should go to prison.
Yeah, there's just this domino effect that's going. So you have the straw purchase, and then you have the improper storing of the firearm. And, really, for her to say it was the dad's fault, they're both adults. Mm-hmm. And the child is a child, so you have to take ownership. Again, you can't delegate that responsibility away, and so you can delegate the authority to say that the father is the one that's supposed to lock up the firearm, but that doesn't mean that you aren't responsible for actions if one of the parents doesn't do it. You both should be aware of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So raise your kids, people.
Right. Absolutely. It's kind of amazing, and this kind of ties into
another case of improper storage. So also in Michigan, what's going on up there? Right. So a dad did not store the firearm properly, and one day after Michigan passed a law about safe storage of guns, a dad's gun ended up in the hands of a little 2-year-old.
Right.
And she shot herself in the face. And so he is going to jail.
Right.
But again, another instance of someone lying about purchasing a gun because he's a felon, and felons are not supposed to have guns. But this is just another argument for you can have all the gun laws you want, but you're just making it harder for people who
are law-abiding,
who actually follow the rules to follow the rules. Because this guy did not follow the rules, and this precious little 2-year-old is in the hospital, and they're saying best case scenario, she loses her right eye. But I mean, shooting through the skull, your chances aren't stellar.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of things. So one, he was a convicted felon. He's not supposed to own a firearm anyway. So there's that. Two, he obviously left the firearm out. He says, look, I didn't know how she got a hold of it. Well, she got a hold of it because you left it out. I'll answer that question for you. The other thing is he lied to the police. And so he took the child to the hospital and basically was like, I don't know what happened, things like that. Yeah, everybody knows what happened. The 2-year-old was curious, and looked
like, I've never seen this before.
Looked down the barrel of the gun and pulled the trigger is ultimately what happened. And so there's no other scenario that could happen. But here we have, if we're looking at a Venn diagram and we're looking to see where these circles of criminal liability, potential criminal liability, and civil liability, I'd have to say, these are overlapping very well for the prosecution.
I think they're way on the far end of definitely.
Yeah, criminal liability.
Yes. But, then there's this kind of slippery slope argument with the Gabby Petito's parents.
Sure.
If you don't recall, she was a 22-year-old travel blogger. She was dating this guy called Brian Laundrie. Yes, his name is actually Laundrie. Like, even the police officer talking to him was like, is your name really Laundrie? So anyway, he killed her, and he came back from Wyoming without her, and the parents, his parents, got on up in front of everyone and was like, well, we hope she comes back. And
yeah, that's the problem that I have.
Her parents are going after his parents.
Right. Yeah. So, apparently, again, we're not attorneys, and we weren't actually present. So this is all based upon news reporting and court documents. But apparently, Brian called his parents, and the parents thought that something was wrong because Brian just said Gabby was gone. And so she says that what went through, and I say she, Brian Laundrie's mom, says that she thought or interpreted that gone was that she got a rental car and was going in a different direction. But apparently Brian called his parents back again and said, look, I need an attorney. I need you to get me an attorney. I'm on my way back to Florida. And again, obviously we're not participants of that phone call, but they did get an attorney. And when Brian returned, the attorney apparently advised them not to talk. Just keep quiet.
Usually a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So now you've got Gabby's parents and uncle that are on television saying, if anybody knows what's going on with Gabby, please, return her home safe. And here's where I think Brian Laundrie's parents or specifically the mother made a mistake, is they issued a statement saying, we love Gabby. I'm paraphrasing here, but we love Gabby as a daughter, and we hope that she's okay and that she's going to be found and things like that. And more likely than not, at this particular point in time, the parents know that Gabby's dead, right? And so that is what Gabby's parents are suing or sued. I guess there has been a settlement that has been reached. But,
settled an undisclosed amount.
But we're suing for emotional distress because had the Brian's mom just kept her mouth shut and didn't put this false sense of hope out there with with her statement, then it wouldn't have caused emotional distress to Gabby's parents.
Some people would argue, the parents, Brian's parents have the right to free speech, and in times when they were quiet, heeding their counsel's advice.
Right.
Also the right to silence. But, unfortunately, I guess you don't always have the right to free speech. I mean, you can't say bomb in an airport. So,
you can't do slander, can't do libel, things like that. But, obviously the whole situation was tragic. There's plenty of lawsuits that are going around. Gabby's parents are suing the police department that did the interaction between the two of them post the report of a domestic abuse
for
incident.
letting him go.
Yeah, for letting him go when there was witnesses that were testifying that they saw him hit her and things like that. So there's plenty of lawsuits that are going to go around over this case. But when we add this to that Venn diagram that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We have the criminality over here, and then we have the civil over here. The Crumblies, as they're going through the justice system, I think the father is now going through his court date, and he's trying to get a lot of the evidence that convicted his wife thrown out. Right,
stack it in, stack it on the wife.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, look, you already convicted her, so all that stuff's going to be towards her. But when you look at those intersections and where the parents have culpability, so obviously in the father's case, it's 100% mm-hmm. culpability in looking at that. And then you look into the Laundries on the other end of the spectrum, mm-hmm. not criminally liable for anything because they haven't had any charges, but it's, obviously they mm-hmm. have the civil liability for that.
And so compared to criminal liability, what's the burden of proof there?
Yeah, so for the civil, it's a preponderance of evidence,
mm-hmm.
and so that's what it is. It's more likely than not, 51%. There's 5 burdens of proof, and the 2 most famous ones that you get on television is the probable cause, which is where police can arrest you, and then beyond a reasonable doubt, which is how you get a conviction. But it starts off with reasonable suspicion, probable cause, preponderance of the evidence, again, more likely than mm-hmm. not. Then you have clear and convincing evidence, and then you have the beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. I just feel a little bad for them, the Laundries, because, they may have been emotional and made a bad decision, but you got to be careful what you say. But didn't she tell a bad joke?
Well, so I wouldn't call it a bad joke. She wrote him a letter. She wrote him a letter,
which is
and on the letter
makes me feel a little less sorry for her.
Exactly. So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that because she wrote a letter that said "burn after reading," so destruction of evidence, and in it talked about that she was going to bake him a cake and put a shiv in there so he could protect himself. Now, this is not 1940.
Yeah. First of all, that's really stupid.
Right.
We have these things called metal detectors. And so, don't feel sorry for her at all after hearing about that
exactly.
one.
So, what that does is it says that, hey, look, she's got a mens rea. She has a guilty mind.
Yeah.
Because she knows that her son did do something. If he didn't do something, then why would he be going to jail or prison? And why would she need to bake a cake and put a shiv in it?
Yeah, because I think a reasonable parent, like as much as you love your child, you should smack them in the face and then hand them over to the police and this is what he told me.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But it was obviously an interesting case. It was kind of captivated the nation, and I think there were a lot of people that were talking about how it was unfair that, or the only reason that it got enough national attention as it did is because it was 2 Caucasian individuals, and that people of color don't really get an opportunity to get national attention like this. But
2 people are dead. Okay, because Brian committed suicide. So keep that in mind. And now people are tangled up in all sorts of lawsuits. So
yeah, but I mean, it just this. You have to look at the circumstances. I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy unusual to see these interactions and to have the body camera footage and things like that, and for her to already both of them to be social media people because they're doing YouTube van life type stuff as they're going around. So they already had a social media following. So there were a lot of things that led up just to make this case unusual. And I think that's why it got the national attention.
That's why it's getting the national attention. Now, do you think that if Brian had not killed himself, would Gabby's parents would they have gone after Brian's parents? Because, people want someone to punish.
Right.
They want someone to pay for, their daughter being gone. And so usually I think people would be satisfied if the person who actually did it got punished.
Well, yeah. So, obviously, there wasn't a criminal, not that I'm aware of, that there's a criminal case pending against Brian's parents. But I would say, the lawsuit was against Brian Laundrie's estate, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't sue Brian's parents. They sued Brian's estate. I think it was for $3 million.
Well, that's the estate, but this other civil suit is against
the
parents.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean, it's just I don't know. I think the real reason that they're doing it is for the emotional distress that was caused by the statement of the parents and the fact that they knew that Gabby was dead and purported to hope for the best and hope that she comes home and that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say yes, because when you're looking at who has civil liability, again, there's plenty to go around. And a lot of times you're just going to shotgun blast it out there and see what sticks. I don't know what if there was a settlement in the police force. I don't know.
Well, again, that would set another precedent every time a cop lets someone go. But there are plenty of people who don't need to be let go. I can tell you that.
Right.
This is so depressing. Anyway, let's switch to a topic I can get on board with. So, the old saying, finders keepers. I find something, I get to keep it. Well, that's what a prosecutor in Arizona is saying about one of the illegal immigrants that committed crimes in New York.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is an interesting case. I mean, and I actually kind of predicted this. This is a little bit different than what I predicted, but I just kind of kept it to myself. But I do see the United States starting to split and fracture. I mean, if you look in the 1800s, there were slave states and free states, and if you were a slave that escaped and made your way to a free state, then you could get your freedom and things like that. And then but it's different here in this particular instance in that you have law and order states and you have states that have lax laws.
Yes. So a prosecutor does not want to send Raad Almansoori back to New York because, first of all, he committed crimes in Arizona. I believe he's suspected of stabbing at least 2 people along a number of other things. She does not want to send him back to New York. And she says, hey, Alvin Bragg, you're not exactly punishing people up there. We want to make sure he pays. We don't trust you to send him back, even if you do charge him up there. We don't trust you to send him back to us so we can punish him for the things he did here.
Yeah, one of the big things is because of all of this no bail and low bail and ROR, release on your own recognizance, for all of these criminal defendants, she's afraid. So look, he's in jail now.
I mean,
if I send him to you, you'll let him out.
Beat the crap out of 2 New York City police cops, and they got to go. I mean, come on, her rationale is not unfounded.
Yeah, and she has those guys in her jail as well.
Yes.
4 of them. So, a few weeks ago, the illegal immigrants were beating 2 New York police officers as they were trying to make an arrest, and they were 6 of them were arrested, and the very next day they were released on 0 bail and immediately got on a free bus that was paid for to go to Arizona, and they're giving the middle finger to the press cameras as they're getting out of jail.
Geez, I wonder why police forces have a recruiting problem.
Yeah, I mean,
you let someone beat the crap out of me, and you let them go.
Right.
Huh.
So she's afraid that if she, honors New York's extradition request, then all of a sudden he'll get the same no bail, low bail, and get released. And she doesn't want that to happen. She said, "Look, he's in jail right now.
He can't hurt anybody.
He can't hurt anybody."
And also, I looked up the Arizona law about, extraditions, and so it says that they have to complete an extradition application, and the governor may choose to do it. And I was like, well, the governor, we're talking about a prosecutor here, and usually it is decided, arranged governor to governor. So even though she does not want to extradite him, unfortunately, it is more of the governor's decision. And unfortunately, the governor of New York and the governor of Arizona are both Democrats. So
Right.
I wonder if yet again a Democrat is going to toe the line. Or is this Democrat, Arizona's governor, going to actually do the right thing and allow this prosecutor to prosecute, in my opinion, should be full force of the law, this criminal.
So speaking of doing the right thing, the scenario that I was thinking in my head of, having law and order states and having loose states, kind of the same thing, looking at the slave states and the free states, is a scenario where somebody like Mr. Penny, who defended a subway car full of people from a homeless person that was screaming, "I want to kill somebody,"
and gesturing,
and so he subdued that individual, and unfortunately the person died. Doesn't and looking at all the cell phone video, he wasn't intending to kill the person. He was,
and there were 2 other people helping
him, and there were plenty of people that said, yes, we were all in fear of our life, and then of course you've got the people that were in fear for their life, but then later on have said, well, I don't think it was that bad. But at the time,
well, they're in New York.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
in New York. They're probably used to it by
now.
now.
So in that particular instance, he was not arrested at the scene. Could there be a scenario where, obviously the Republicans are saying, this guy did the right thing. A lot of Democrats are saying the same thing.
I mean, if our kids were on that train, I'd want him there too.
Right. But, there are some left-leaning people that are like, no, he should go to jail. Could he have left New York for a conservative state like Texas or Florida and have conservatives say we feel he did the right thing. We're not going to extradite him back to New York because you guys are going to try and prosecute him, and we don't think you should. Is that going to be a scenario that could possibly happen? Again, you're having this delineation of states. I mean, we're all divided, but is that something that would be possible where a judgment could be made by a conservative state to say, look, we're not going to send this guy. This guy's a hero. We're not going to send this guy back to you guys so that you can rake him over the coals. Extradition denied.
Yeah.
And so then the only scenario that I can see that would happen out of that is the federal government would have to get involved and look to see, okay, he's not being charged for murder, but civil rights violations, and so now he'll enter the federal system. Anyway, I can just see this being a nightmare. So, with this DA saying, look, we're not going to extradite him. We're going to keep him because he's in jail. We're denying your request because we feel that you will let him go. it's along the same thing. We feel as though you're going to prosecute a person who we feel should not be prosecuted, and therefore we're not going to extradite. I mean, where does the line get drawn? There are nations. So for instance, Mexico does not have the death penalty. They're happy just killing themselves on a daily basis of their own accord, but the government doesn't have a death penalty. And they have a policy if someone has fled the United States, even if they're guilty of a crime, and the penalty for their crime would be the death penalty. Mexico does not extradite the person back to the U.S. Because and without guarantees from the State Department that the death penalty would be taken off the table. And so there's instances where nations do that to each other. Mm-hmm. So would it
why
start?
Not states?
Why not states? And obviously with this news article that we see right now, it's already happening at some level. But will it be expanded?
Another slippery slope argument. By the way, I personally feel that Penny should have received a parade, not a catwalk.
No, perp walk. Yeah, I completely agree, and it's going to be interesting for him to have a jury of his peers.
It's going to discourage people from doing the right thing. I mean, we had I believe it was an Amazon worker or as a delivery worker of some sort get arrested because an illegal immigrant was violently, threatening him, trying to steal packages, and he hit the immigrant upside the head with a piece of ice and got arrested. I'm like, seriously, what? It's better to let him steal the truck? Yeah,
I mean, when we look at that case,
police can't be everywhere.
There was a whole bunch of things going wrong there. Apparently, the illegal immigrant was beyond intoxicated.
Drunk in public, right there.
Drunk in public, had his pants down and was had
indecent exposure,
genitalia on display, and apparently was enjoying himself. The Amazon delivery driver sees him. The guy runs into the Amazon truck, and the Amazon driver's like, "Look, I don't want this guy all over these packages. Your packages." By the way.
I think a lot of men would hit him just for being naked and coming at him full force. You just hit him right there, truck or not, to be stolen.
Yeah, and so the Amazon driver, like you said, hit him with a snowball, icy snowball, whatever, and the Amazon driver went and got the police himself and brought the police back and said, "This is what happened." The immigrant said, "This is what happened," and the Amazon driver said, "Look, just pull. There's video cameras, I'm sure, everywhere. Just pull the videotape, and you'll see I'm right." And they both got arrested. I think the Amazon driver got a desk ticket for assault, and the guy got indecent exposure and
drunk in
public or something like that. But still, here's an instance where the Amazon driver was quoted as, again, I'm going to paraphrase the quote, but I was always taught not to have the police help you because they don't help you. So he broke his upbringing and went and got the police and got exactly what he thought was going to happen, and he didn't get the help he thought he was going to get.
How are we supposed to encourage people to do the right thing? I mean, we try to teach our kids to do the right thing, but they're going to grow up seeing the opposite being encouraged.
So anyway, we thought this article was really interesting just because is this the future of states with lax laws and states with that enforce laws? Are we going to see a further division? We already see it along a political divide, but now are we going to see it on a criminal divide? Yep. That's kind of amazing. Okay. Well, please stand by after these messages. Okay, so welcome back to Azimuth Podcast, and the next article that we're going to be talking about was something that came in the news, and it's San Francisco.
Oh boy,
is having the first non-citizen to serve on an elections commission. Is this the new Manchurian Candidate? We see a huge influx of Chinese nationals at the southern border that are coming over as illegal immigrants. And for the first time, Chinese nationals are exceeding Mexican nationals coming over the border. Now, let me explain something. When I use the word Chinese, I do not mean a race. That is not a race. That is a country of origin. Asians would be the race of people. But what I'm talking about is people from China. So when I say Chinese, I'm not throwing
precise words precisely.
Use precise words precisely. I'm not throwing a blanket. I'm saying people from China who have Chinese passports and are citizens of China are arriving at the southern border and infiltrating into the U.S. Oftentimes, they're single men, military-aged fighting males, and
just like most of the other nationalities that are coming across the border.
Exactly. And they are now have exceeded the amount of Mexican nationals that are coming across the border. So it's interesting to see, that we have non-citizens that are being appointed to roles that are concerning elections.
So she isn't even eligible to vote,
right,
but she's supposed to be on the board of elections. So last year, I looked up how is this even possible. Last year, the California court decided that non-citizens could be on the board of elections. Where they get the logic from that, I have no idea, because, you want people who represent the United States who have a vote, who are allowed to vote, be on the elections. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So her name is Kelly Wong, and she is grew up in China as well.
She's only been here since 2019.
Right. And she is an advocate for immigrant rights. And that's fine. To be an advocate. They're not
American citizens, though. They don't have the same rights. I'm so tired of talking about immigrant rights. Like, look, you have the right to not be beaten to death just because you look different, but you are not an American citizen, so you have not earned the right to be like the rest of us. And if we went to China, or if we went to Venezuela or any of these other countries, guess what? We would not have the same rights there.
Right. So it's interesting that that she's been assigned to this election council, and so there is this push in California to have non-citizens vote in local school boards and in local elections. And I think it starts a huge slippery slope. So we have the influx of Chinese men coming across the southern border, mostly in California area. What are they going to be doing? Is there some type of cooperation, with this immigrant rights advocate, and then now being on the election, council for San Francisco? Is there the possibility of some type of collusion to allow these citizens to subvert our democracy?
It's
a realm of possibility.
Not seeming less and less outrageous of a conspiracy theory. But this isn't really new. Weren't you telling me about a template?
So I believe it was 6 election cycles ago that in Chinatown in San Francisco, a number of advocates for voting, right? So they're helping people get registered to vote. And they had cardboard templates that were pre-cut out and had check marks in various locations that you could just overlay on the voter registration form. And they were grabbing people and overlaying this template and saying, fill this out in the template. So they're steering all these people on what boxes to check and things like that. And you can't do that. You can't. That's against the law. And so
they may as well have just filled it out and said, sign here.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what was happening. And so they got in trouble. And I don't recall if there was an arrest or if they just got hey, stop doing that. But here we go. It's these advocacy groups that are pushing non-citizens to register to vote and pre-filling out their forms for them in the effect of having a cardboard template that overlays on top of the voter registration form. So I see a lot of huge problems with this.
Well, you said advocacy group. I'm getting more and more leery of anything that is a feel-good name. Like, why do they feel the need to make it sound super feel-good? Maybe I should check this out. And often, it's like Inflation Reduction Act. Did nothing to reduce inflation.
Exactly.
Border bill. Really not about the border. It's a Ukraine bill. And now it is pretty much officially in Ukraine and pro-Hamas bill as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, buyer beware. Don't trust everything you see. It's like, oh, you're too judgmental. Really? Have you not seen enough?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all of the things that are happening, it just makes you go, We're not conspiracy theorists, but we have
just take a second look.
Just take a second look. We have a woman from China that is a non-citizen being appointed to do elections. She's advocating for non-citizens to vote or to have the right to vote, and then we have a large influx of Chinese men sneaking across the southern border, which would make them non-citizens. It just something that makes you go.
They haven't paid taxes. They haven't, studied all the history that we had to learn growing up, and we should learn history. They haven't had to do the things that we've had to do. They did other things in China that prioritized China. This is our country. So if they haven't had to grow up prioritizing the United States, then they need to take the citizenship exam and go through the processes like everyone else so that they can prove that the United States is a priority for them.
Yeah, and become a naturalized citizen.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look out after ourselves first, because if we fall, no one's coming to save us.
Right. It's a great and wonderful thing whenever, somebody becomes a naturalized citizen. It's because, a lot of countries, you're a citizen by birth. Actually, I take that back. In most countries, you're a citizen of that country if your parents were citizens of that country. Okay. The United States is one of the rarities in the world that has birthright citizenship, just being born on the terrain of the United States.
Yeah.
So that's a rarity. So, but when somebody chooses to become a naturalized citizen, that's a beautiful thing, because
and they're usually the most pro-America people
absolutely
you can find, and I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, you see them flying, holding little American flags, and they're proud because they had to earn it, and they had to study for it and take the exam. And I would challenge anybody to go online and take a practice exam of the naturalization exam and see how well you can do.
I think that should be a high school requirement.
To graduate high school?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's stuff that you take for granted. Like, what are the three branches of government? Who was the first president of the United States? I mean, it's a good history. It's good to know anyway, these things. And so, it's just, it's a beautiful thing to see people who want to be citizens, but they have to do it the right way. And
she thinks she can just skip the line and influence elections instead of getting the right to vote. She's not even allowed to vote. Thank goodness, because, again, I don't know what her priorities are.
Right.
But, this is a dangerous signal for the rest of the world, because, we lived in Morocco for over a year. And one of the biggest takeaways for me was the rest of the world watches us so much more than we watch them. I mean, most of us can't point out Morocco on a map or any of these other countries on a map. And you can go to a peasant with no money living on the street in Morocco, middle of nowhere Morocco, and they can tell you more about us than we can tell about them.
Right.
And so they are paying attention. And so when they see things like, someone who doesn't have the right to vote here influence voting here, it's like, hey, it's free season. We may as well jump in and punch too. It's like, bullies in a schoolyard. It's like, hey, let's just pile on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was in Brazil maybe about 15 years ago in Rio de Janeiro, and I was talking to some of the locals, and it was an election season. I believe it was the 2008 election. And so it was kind of going in full swing, and it was interesting because the Brazilians that I was talking to said that they pay attention hyper vigilantly to all the U.S. elections, and they said they can't believe that typically the typical I think is it 20 or 30% turnout. It's low. It's like really low, and they blew their mind.
Says like 10 million people are like politically engaged. I'm like, we're a country of 330 million people. Now, I don't know how many of those are adults,
right?
But still, that is a tiny portion.
Yeah, I want to say it's 20 or 30% turnout actually come out to vote.
I think
that just
Taylor Swift has like 300 times more fans in the United States.
Right. So anyway, they said, it's amazing to them that there are so few Americans that care enough to come out and vote. They said, we would love to be able to vote in U.S. elections because what happens in the United States affects the world. Affects the world. And so they feel as though they have a stake in it as well because their economies are tied to the United States and the policies that are tied to the United States. And so they wish that they could vote. And so obviously they can't because they're non-citizens. But again, this goes to this article where we have non-citizen advocates that are being assigned to election committees.
Well, I think if we paid attention to the rest of the world, like the rest of the world pays attention to us, I think we would have avoided a lot of missteps and some of the pitfalls of where we are now. We saw Europe just bring on immigrants, welfare states, and they had a lot of gender clinics. Now a lot of gender clinics are gone, yet we have increased ours. And so we're not paying attention and learning from other people's mistakes. And I try to tell our kids, one of the wisest things you can do as a human being is learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to go through that suffering of the consequences yourself. I grew up in rural Georgia, and I learned from a lot of people's mistakes. If I hadn't, I'd be a meth head somewhere.
I doubt that.
Well, teen pregnancy is super high. A handful of my brother, a majority of my brother's friends growing up, ended up in jail for one reason or the other related to drugs. One newspaper article about 15 years ago, 3 guys went to jail for some scheme robbing a pharmacy of drugs. 2 of the 3 were friends that my brother grew up playing with. It's just so I just learned from people getting knocked up too early, people getting involved in drugs, and I was in high school, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay on money because I would do chores around the house for money. I would go and clean other people's houses for money. But I was like, you know what? Not only should I go get a job for money, but also so that I wouldn't be bored, because being bored and have the energy of a teenager, dangerous thing. So we need to learn from the rest of the world, and hopefully people are watching us and hope not planning how to attack us, but learning from our mistakes as well.
Well, France has just recently passed a law that makes it easier to deport people if they're disrespecting the country. And there was an imam.
That's one we need to watch for.
Yeah, there was an imam that was on social media with a French flag saying that the French flag was a symbol of Satan. And they're like, get out.
Why are you then?
They sent him back to Tunisia. And so, that there are countries that are saying, look, we're not tolerating this anymore. If you're not going to integrate into our society, then we don't want you to be part of our society. And
it's not about erasing, your memory of where you came from. It's just so that everyone's on the same page, with the same values, so we can live together.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for watching Azimuth Podcast, and have a great day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.